The May 23rd, 2012 meeting of the Environment and Public Works Committee will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ansello?
Here.
Mr. Baroff?
Here.
Mr. Colby?
Here.
Mr. Haney? Here. Chairman Howland?
Here.
Mr. Rocco?
Here.
Mr. Wilcox?
He's on the road. He'll be here at some point.
Is there anyone signed up for the public forum?
There's not.
Is there anyone present who is not signed up to speak who would like to address the committee at this time? The next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. You have the April 25th, 2012 minutes of the Environment and Public Works Committee before you. They will stand approved unless the clerk is notified of any changes by the end of the day. Next, we have a presentation. Mr. Paul Johnson, Associate Planner, Planning Development Department, will now give us a brief overview of the 2013-2018 Capital Improvement Program as it pertains to the Environment and Public Works Committee.
All legislators should have received the county executive's proposed program. This comes reviewed and recommended by the Monroe County Planning Board, which conducted 3 public information meetings as part of their review. I would point out that this is a plan for our investments in county infrastructure over the next 6 years. There are no funding approvals associated with your action on this plan. The first opportunity for funding will come with the capital budget, which will be submitted in the fall along with the operating budget. There are 6 areas that I want to cover very briefly with the committee. The first would be aviation, which you will find on page 27 of the program. This list of projects for the Greater Rochester International Airport is very much the same as last year's program. There's one new project, the Airport Building Improvements Project, to fund needed improvements to buildings on the airport properties other than the terminal. Also, a number of the projects have been moved out or advanced from 1 year to 4 years from last year's program schedule and have had their funding either increased or decreased. This is often a reflection of changing priorities at the Federal Aviation Administration, which, as you can see through the funding plan, is one of the principal financiers of the airport program. On page 37, you will find the Pure Waters program. Here we have listed in detail projects for each of the 4 Pure Waters districts. They include equipment upgrades and replacement at the Frankie Van Laer treatment plant, pump station improvements, trunk sewer and general collection system improvements in each of these 4 Pure Waters districts. There is just one new project that would be the Rochester Operations Center scheduled for 2018. Moving on to the fleet program, which you'll find on page 42, there have been some increases and decreases in funding for each of these general equipment categories for parks, traffic engineering, and highways and bridges. On page 40, you'll find the Geographic Information Services section. This project, the Geographic Information System Enterprise Development, has appeared in previous programs. In this 6-year effort, we've reduced funding by 10% for this project. On page 44, you'll find the Facilities Management section. There are 3 new projects in this area: the Hall of Justice elevator improvements, Westfall building reconstruction, and the Fleet Center improvements. There also have been some cost adjustments to virtually every project on this list, and again, we've achieved a 10.2% reduction in this program over last year's program. And finally, for this committee, on page 62, you'll find the Monroe County Water Authority project. These are the same 6 basic project categories that have appeared in previous capital programs. Funding is up about 12% from last year's program, and we've had some, again, increases in virtually all the program categories except for hydrant replacement and large meter replacement and upgrades, which have been decreased. And that, Mr. Chairman, is my presentation, and we'd be happy to answer questions when this item comes up on the agenda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. Let the record show that Legislator Wilcox is now in attendance. The next item on the agenda is new business.
Referral 12-183, authorize a contract.
Moved by Legislator Colby, seconded by Legislator Ansello. Is there any discussion? Legislator Baroff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through the Chair of the Administration, I really just have one question, and that is it listed the O'Brien and Greer consultants were selected. What other consultants, if any, were considered for this project?
Through the chair, Jason Kennedy with Environmental Services. Actually, O'Brien and Gear was the only respondent to the request for proposals.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Being none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor? Opposed? The item passes.
Referral 12-185, authorize a contract.
Moved by Legislator Rocco, seconded by Legislator Colby. Is there any discussion? Legislator Baroff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as with the previous referral, my question is, what, if any, other consultants were considered for this project aside from Bergman Associates?
Through the chair, 4 other firms responded to the request for proposals.
Thank you. And through the Chair, could you please list the 4 firms?
Through the chair, yes. In addition to Bergman Associates, Labella Associates, Lou Engineers, and O'Brien and Gear.
Thank you. And through the Chair, then in total there were 4 submissions.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor? All those in favor? All those opposed? The item passes.
Referral 12-190, the 23.
Moved by Legislator Ansello, seconded by Legislator Colby. Is there any discussion? Legislator Haney.
I have some questions, Mr. Chairman. On the airport section, could you give us a brief update on the alternative energy project at the airport? It appears that what had been projected as 2013 project costs have now been spread across 2013 and 2014.
Through the chair, we would prefer to get back to the committee on that question. It's okay.
Through the chair, there's a project, airport building improvement. What buildings, since there's other specific building projects that are in the CIP, what buildings are we talking about here that we're going to be improving? We've basically rebuilt the terminal building, I think, in the last 4 or 5 years.
Through the chair, Scott Adair, Director of Finance. The primary purpose behind this project would be the fire station, but there is a potential that other facilities on airport property that are owned by the county could be improved as well.
Okay. So it's more or less a generic allocation? For
Through the chair, that's correct, yes.
Through the chair, there's a project, Airport Support Complex, which is showing up for the year 2017. As part of the 2012 capital budget, we authorized a $2 million of bonding for this project, and now it appears to be getting pushed way out to 2017. Is these are these, they have the same title, are they the same project?
Through the chair, that would be ultimately the replacement of the original one 5 years out from now. So when that equipment that was purchased as part of the 2012 project, useful life was eliminated effectively, this would be to replace those particular items of equipment that were used to support aircraft support services.
So the equipment that we're buying in 2012 is going to have to be replaced already in 2017?
Through the chair, it is anticipated that it's approximately a 5-year life cycle that it would need to be renewed at that particular point in time. If it's not necessary, then this project would not ask for support in that particular year for the CIP budget.
What's the through the chair? What's the bonding period? 5 years?
Through the chair, yes, it is.
Okay. In the Pure Waters program, this proposal for Rochester Operations Center, the Pure Waters District bought a building on East Henrietta Road from the county about 6-7 years ago for $2 million, which became, I think it was $2 million, which became the Rochester Operations Center. Why are we now going to be building or buying another Rochester Operations Center?
Through the chair, respectfully, I'm not familiar with the property that was referenced, but the current Rochester Operations Center is located at 444 East Henrietta Road, and the project was constructed and bonded back in the mid-1980s and is the current home of the Rochester Pure Waters District Collection System fleet. This project here anticipates an addition out at the Fleet Center on Paul Road and the relocation of the staff and equipment that currently resides on East Henrietta Road, out to the Consolidated Fleet Center location.
Through the chair, what will become of the existing operations center then?
Through the chair, I don't have that answer at this time. I don't know that that's been thoroughly contemplated.
Well, my dilemma is, through the chair, my dilemma is that you're correct. The county built that building back in whatever year you cited. However, back about 8 years ago, 9 years ago, in a one-shot revenue source, the county sold the building to the Rochester Pure Waters District on the theory that it really was being used by the Rochester Pure Waters District. So the ratepayers in the city district paid $2 million to buy the building from the county of Monroe. So that the building now technically is owned by the Pure Waters District. It's not owned by the county of Monroe. That being the case, my question is, why does it really need to be replaced? And number two, I assume the building will be put up for sale as surplus when the shift occurs. And why wouldn't the revenues from the sale of the building pay for the new building?
Through the chair, the building is the property of the Rochester Pure Waters District, and it is anticipated that any revenues derived from the sale of that building would in fact go back into the Rochester Pure Waters District. And again, certainly those potential revenues could be used to offset construction of the new facility and or addition as it's described. Beyond that, we have not contemplated any further details at this point.
Thank you. Needless to say, some of us will be watching what happens with that money with great interest. In the fleet category, Mr. Chairman, through you, there's a significant increase in what's labeled as parks equipment. The parks equipment, as I recall, used to be in the parks portion of the CIP. Is this just moving the allocations, or are we in fact adding money, or?
Through the chair, this project does represent all of the parks equipment capital budget. And yes, in fact, the dollar request has increased slightly in each of the forecasted years, 2013 through 18.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, why have we moved the purchase of parks equipment out of the Parks Department?
Through the chair, effectively what we determined in preparing the CIP plan was that the fleet services is the most appropriate place to handle the purchase of any vehicle, and thus it's running through the fleet process at this point in time, but it truly is parks equipment and will ultimately be purchased by parks funds.
In the solid waste portion, through you, Mr. Chairman, there's nothing in the capital. The solid waste function has disappeared from the CIP. Most recently, we've had a project in there related to the resource recovery facility recycling center complex improvements, which I think was previously listed for $1.6 million. My question is, where has that project gone, and why are there no solid waste projects in the CIP?
Through the chair, at the present time, we believe that we have enough capital dollars from previously approved capital projects for solid waste to be able to fund that project as it moves forward.
So this, through you, Mr. Chairman, this project, which had been called Resource Recovery Facility Recycling Center Complex Improvements, the project is still going forward. It's just that there's no additional funding needed?
Through the chair, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair of the administration, during the presentation, you mentioned that there were 3 or 4 projects that were pushed out in under the aviation category. I've identified 3, and I wonder if I have them correct, and if there are additional ones in addition to that. The Airfield Drainage Improvements Project, the Vail Volunteer Airport Low Emissions, and Perimeter Service Road Projects are the 3 I've identified. Are there any other that are moved out as well?
Through the chair, I included in my tally the alternative energy project, which has had funding shifted into 2014, so there's 2 years worth of funding there.
Fair enough. Then through the chair, then there's a total of 4 projects being moved out. Thank you. And I have a couple of questions about that, actually. And through the chairs, is there a reason, an explanation why these 4 projects were, 4 projects were chosen to be moved out, as opposed to any other project? Was it a process of priorities or a process of funding availability, or a combination thereof?
Through the chair, it is a matter of priorities for expenditure of these funds.
Thank you. And through the chair of the administration, of these 4 projects that have moved out, if we face further budget cuts, which one would get cut first, or pushed out further first?
Through the chair, the projects are listed in priority order. However, that is kind of a continuous assessment process, if you will. So at the time that the funding cut might occur, that list would be re-examined.
Thank you. But through the chair of the administration, if it were to happen today, odds are it'd be the perimeter surface road then.
Through the chair, that's a possibility, yes.
Well, that's true. Thank you. Staying with the aviation area, I did also want to ask about the project that's listed as heavy equipment. It's actually it's been moved up from 2014 to 2013, and I was just curious as to, with the additional $500,000, what equipment actually is being purchased, and why did it need to be purchased more quickly?
Through the chair, as is the case with every capital program we prepare, there's a kind of a continuous assessment of needs, and it looks like the airport has determined that some equipment has reached its life cycle end and needs replacement.
And through the chair of the administration, but we don't know what equipment they're looking for?
The project description does, I think, identify the types of equipment in general. I do not have a specific list of itemized pieces of equipment to provide you now.
Well, through the chair of the administration, I would like to request that if you could, all possibly, you get the itemized list, particularly since there's been an increase that was unexpected of $500,000. I'd just like to know where it was going. Is that possible to do?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, what has been briefed to me and what has been identified is firefighting equipment, specifically a pumper, that we are seeking first and foremost AIP funding for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then, through the chair of the administration, talking about the Monroe County Water Authority, I did want to ask, since there was a significant increase of about 12% over the 6-year project cost, is where are these significant increases going, particularly in regards to the residential meter replacement and upgrade program and the storage facilities rehab? They're both increases of over $2 million.
Through the chair, Richard Metzger from the Water Authority is here to answer the question.
Thank you.
I'm Richard Metzger, Executive Engineer for the Water Authority. The authority owns and operates about 45 storage facilities that are all subject to that program. We try to equalize or have uniform funding to the extent we can. However, storage facilities are of different size and configurations. Hence, there's a increase because in the first year we are painting storage facility on Lee Road, which is our second largest facility. Hence, you see a bump in the cost for that year.
Thank you. And in regards to the, through the chair of the administration, in regards to the residential meter replacement program, was that a similar concern, or is there a different reason for that increase of $2 million?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have identified the need to increase the rate of replacement of residential meters.
Then, for my edification, please, through the chair of the administration, am I correct to assume that the inspection process is an ongoing process, that when you finish it, you would actually, after some period of time, begin it anew? Would that be correct, sir?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
If it's an inspection cycle, after you check all 100% of the meters, you would then, after a period of time, begin again and re-inspect them, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is not an inspection program. This is the replacement of the meters.
Okay. That would explain that. And then they have a significant lifespan, I would hope, then.
Correct. Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, the lifespan of a meter is between 15 and 25 years.
Thank you. My apologies for my misunderstanding. That's all.
Any further questions? Legislator Wilcox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair, is anyone aware, have there been any speakers on the CIP that have come before the legislature to present and positions on any of these items?
Mr. Chairman, there were 3 public hearings held by the Planning Board on the proposed CIP. If you're asking about specific committees of the legislature, there was one speaker, I believe, at the Planning and Economic Development Committee meeting that spoke at public forum, which is obviously available to any committee.
I apologize. Who was the speaker? Well, I'm curious on I wasn't here for that committee.
Legislator Wilcox, I think we are getting off the line of questioning that is relevant.
Well, can you just tell me which questions I'm allowed to ask, please, so I can know ahead of time?
Certainly, any question that pertains to this section of the CIP.
Okay. So did anybody? My question is this: did anybody come before any of these committees to express concerns about any part of the CIP?
I think this is a question that would best be handled by giving the administration an opportunity to check. And hopefully, Jerry will be able to talk with you afterwards and get a clarification on the question, okay?
All right, that's fine. I'm getting the impression that you don't want to answer that question. That's fine. That's okay.
Maybe
I understand.
Maybe you're getting the wrong impression. Anyways, is there any further discussion? Legislator Baroth.
Thank you. Through the chair of the administration, I did ask this question at a previous committee, and I want to make sure I had the correct answer because I was thinking about that. I wasn't sure. I asked when the CIP document itself was approved by the planning board, and I believe I was told March 22nd. And then I asked further if there are any amendments since that period of time, March 22nd. And I just wanted to get confirmation from the administration if that was indeed the case.
Mr. Chairman, if the legislator refers to the copy of the CIP that he received, there is a copy of the letter of transmittal from the Planning Board, which does indicate it was March 22nd of 2012. I don't believe any amendments have been entertained or have been approved since that time.
Thank you. Then that's what I want to make sure about. Thank you so much.
Any further discussion? Being none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Ansello? Yes. Mr. Baroth? No. Mr. Colby? Yes. Mr. Haney? No. Chairman Holland?
Yes.
Mr. Rocco? Yes. Mr. Wilcox? No. 4-3, motion passes.
Thank you. Is there any unfinished business to come before the committee? Legislator Wilcox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a letter dated here March 16th, which I sent to the administration regarding how we treat some of the wastewater potentially from natural gas drilling activities.
Okay.
That's March 16th. I think every single committee since that time I've inquired as to when I might get a response.
Well, let me explain something. As far as unfinished business goes, anything that has come to this committee as a referral or as a discussion, we will consider. 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 We we can discuss that, but if it's something that hasn't been referred to this committee or hasn't been on the agenda, hasn't been tabled, we cannot. So I'm going to consider you out of order on this
Okay.
point.
Well, I expected that. Thank you.
Okay. Any other unfinished business? There being no unfinished business, the May 23rd, 2012 meeting of the Environment and Public Works Committee stands adjourned. The next meeting will be June 27th, 2012 at 4:30 p.m.